Did you know that the KLA, this is a pretty crazy one, and this fits right into what that old guy was saying about making up these fake front groups. The Kosovo Liberation Army is a completely invented terror group that combines Al-Qaeda ideology with Marxism. Can't make this up, right? And it's completely concocted. It's totally made up Western CIA created thing. Pretty wild, huh? But they were used by NATO in the Balkans in the 1990s. In the British mainstream commentary, the 1999 NATO bombing against Slobodan Milosevic is a humanitarian intervention. Tony Blair was praised for his defense of the Albanians in Kosovo, whose plight was... Now, by the way, did you remember, he's like an open Fabian socialist, right? Blair, admittedly, he's a member of the Fabian Socialist Society. So he and Bill Clinton, they're all proponents of the third wave, which is the Cold War synthesis of Eastern communism mixed with Western capitalism. That's the overriding philosophy, you understand, of all of this, right? Klaus, technocracy, it's all the Fabian Socialist third way synthesis. It's blending Eastern communism with Western capitalism. Monopoly capitalism, not free market libertarian stuff. However, this is wild. There's another critical aspect of this war that undermines this humanitarian motive. Now, this is a Royal Society researcher. Okay, Mark Cutis is like official Royal Society researcher. So amazingly, sometimes the mainline researchers in text just put out the books that tell you everything. I remember when this book came out, I was like, I got to read that. And I read the whole book, and I was like, what? How are they admitting everything in this book? So he says, British collusion with the KLA, which fought alongside with Al-Qaeda, acted as NATO's ground forces in Kosovo. The debate in the government and mainstream media circles during the war was whether NATO should put troops on the ground or whether Yugoslav forces should deal with it, blah, blah, blah. But what about the KLA itself? Much later in 2006, Gordon Brown said in his speech that meeting the terrorists challenge was necessary at a speech he gave at Chatham House. The threat from Al-Qaeda did not begin on the 11th of the Big Nine event. Instead, it begins with the radical Muslims in Yugoslavia. Yeah, so he's talking about the KLA. The KLA was comprised of ethnic Albanians committed to securing independence for Kosovo and promoting Greater Albania. It was a mix of radicalized youth movements and students, professionals and teachers and doctors, and local rogues. They debuted in 1996. Let's see. It took an armed struggle to make its military debut in 1996 by bombing camps housing Serbian refugees from the wars in Croatia and Bosnia, and by attacking Yugoslav government officials and police stations. By 1998, the KLA controlled parts of Kosovo and armed and organized around 30,000 fighters. From its inception, the KLA targeted Serbian and Albanian civilians. Okay, no surprise there. And in fact, as you can imagine, the KLA received its money from running heroin. That's the old British intelligence, opium and organized crime Sicilian mafia model of funding your operations and your black ops from heroin. The KLA was run by, or one of the KLA units was run by Ayman al-Zawahiri's brother, bin Laden's right-hand man, Ayman al-Zawahiri. His brother was running some of these units. Now that's immediately sus because we all know who actually runs that, right? In my view, that's all British intelligence cooked up fake baloney stuff, right? Al-Zawahiri, those guys, they're basically just British actors wearing beards. KLA forces in Kosovo, Robin Cook stated. I read the report. So this leads to Wesley Clark. If you remember Wesley Clark's statement, the KLA proved useful to the Anglo-American planners. Tony Blair stated a month into the bombing campaign that the KLA is having greater success on the ground than blah, 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 described in media reports as NATO's eyes and ears on the ground. The KLA was using satellite telephones and providing NATO with details of Serbian targets. Some of these communications equipment had been secretly handed over to the KLA by U.S. officers acting as ceasefire monitors, together with the Organization of the OSCE, Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. I think that's mentioned in RATI as one of those Fabian institutions too. They were essentially, in reality, just CIA agents, of course. They gave the KLA U.S. military training. They gave them manuals, field advice, and it was reported that several KLA leaders had the mobile phone numbers of General Wesley Clark and NATO command. Robin Cook, meanwhile, held a joint press conference with KLA representatives at the end of March and was in direct telephone contact with their commander in Kosovo, Hashim Taki. With the war a few years earlier, Britain and the U.S. allowed and facilitated British and other Muslims to travel to Kosovo, volunteering for the... Now, if you remember all the stuff with ISIS and Syria, it's the exact same way. They're doing the exact same thing. So what they were doing here with KLA in Kosovo, they do the exact same thing with ISIS in Syria. If you remember when they were trying to get rid of Assad in the last decade of the 2010s, remember that? They were doing the exact same thing. Let's see. B. Rahman notes that Pakistani militants associated with Harkat ul Mujahideen, HUM, was a TERROR group that fought in Bosnia and was sent to Kosovo via the CIA. Following the 2005 London BOMB-INGS, John Loftus claimed that MI6 worked with the militant organization Al-Muhajirun, the immigrants, to help funnel jihadists to Kosovo. Are you noticing a pattern here? Funneling jihadists to Kosovo, funneling jihadists to Syria. Al-Muhajirun was founded in Saudi Arabia in 1983 by Omar Bakri Muhammad, who in 1986 fled to Britain. Loftus said in a U.S. television interview that Al-Muhajirun leaders all worked for MI6 in Kosovo and that British intelligence actually hired Al-Qaeda to help defend Islamic rights in Albania and Kosovo. Loftus noted that the CIA was funding the operation while British intelligence was doing the hiring and the recruiting. These claims were, John Loftus said, based on an interview given by Bakri himself to Al-Sharq Al-Aswat, a London-based Arabic newspaper, in 2001, October 16. Bakri later denied that he said this, of course. And then he gets into, remember back in the 2000s, remember Aswat? If y'all kept up with all the Big 9 event, then you remember Aswat. John Loftus also claimed that one of the Britons recruited for Kosovo operation by the Al-Muhajirun was Harun Rashid Aswat, the British citizen of Indian origin who became Abu Hamza's assistant at the Finsbury Mosque, who would later crop up in the investigations surrounding the 2005 London BOMB-INGS. According to Loftus, Aswat was a double agent working for British in Kosovo and for Al-Qaeda. Yeah, that's because Al-Qaeda is a tool of the West. Thus, according to the BBC documentary at this time, I don't know which documentary, but the Sharif spent weeks at a camp in Albania preparing for the jihad. This is a figure who is Sharif, who is also connected to the 7-7. So basically, they just took people from the 7-7 event and just trucked them over to Kosovo. Or no, excuse me, people from Kosovo were then later used in the 7/7 event. That's what I'm trying to say. Because the Kosovo stuff's in the 90s, right? One Briton who can be more definitively linked to the Kosovo operations is Omar Khan Sharif, who in 2003 would become notorious for his attempt to ignite himself up in an bar in Tel Aviv. He pulled out at the last moment, but his friend detonated a thing that killed 3 people. According to the BBC documentary, Omar Sharif spent weeks at a camp in Albania during the Kosovo jihad. However, the documentary failed to mention that the covert British training camp was also taking place in Albania at the same time. Sharif had attended al-Muhajirun meetings in Britain and was an admirer of Abu Hamza, who became his mentor. He also met Mohammed Sadiq Khan, the 7/7 bomber, who tried to recruit him to other jihad actions in 2001. Thus, U.S. covert support for the KLA guerrillas did not stop when NATO's Kosovo campaign stopped. So in other words, they kept all their operatives and goons and just trucked them over to London for that event. That's pretty wild. Now, that's not me. That's a Royal Society researcher. Okay, so Royal Institute for International Affairs, Royal Society researcher, Mark Cutis.